Hello everybody, this is video number 5, CD number 2. This video shows the bogie wheel torso-elastic inspection after pressure washing the bus. You see some of the many 12-inch wooden blocks that I used and stacked on each other to support the entire bus in areas going to have framing removed. And I wanted to help control any weak points in the bus from sagging and so forth from all my welding and cutting and all that. Now you're going to see photos of the torso-elastic tube and wheel inspections before any disassembly. Again, all problems on one bogie wheel area are duplicated on the opposite side of the bus. Inspection of the bogie wheel torso-elastic assembly shows 3 serious cracks in the actual wheel assemblies, as shown in the photos I'm showing you. This further indicates that the entire wheel torso-elastic assemblies are toast and they need to be completely replaced. Further inspection of the complete torso-elastic tube found that the actual tube was rusted to the bus. There was road debris coating all over the tubes, and that was disassembly of the tubes was going to be difficult, and was especially when I was going to be working alone. Cleanup of the bogie wheel was needed so that the tube could be removed from the bus frame. The wheel assembly was cleaned to see what, if anything, could be salvaged if needed. Removal of the torso-elastic tube was extremely difficult and dangerous. Use of my engine hoist was done to find the center of balance for the tube and wheel assembly so that the assembly could be removed from the bus frame. Complete removal of the tube assembly was from the bus took 8 hours perhaps, and much patience was needed for safety of my entire body. After removal of the torso-elastic tube from the wheel assembly, it was discovered that even the gear splines of the tube were nearly rounded off, and also that all the rubber inside of the tube was deteriorated and impossible to do its intended job. There was just not any part of the entire assembly that was reusable in any way. The removal of the fuel tanks on each side of the bus being worked on needs to be done to further inspect and repair any bus frame damage from rusting supporting the tanks. The fuel tanks need to be jacked out of their resting areas in the bus into the last baggage compartment, which is the only way the fuel tanks can be removed for any reason. Looking into the last baggage compartment, it is noted in these photos that there is an empty storage space in between the fuel tanks. This area was covered by a sheet metal, and then when I took all the metal off, I found this empty space. This area will be discussed later, as I intend to use this area for my black and gray waste storage tank. And here is an excellent view of the empty area I intend to use usefully for our waste tank. After the fuel tanks are removed, they were inspected for pinholes and so forth, and to be sure that they have the integrity to be still used as fuel tanks. After grinding to clean them up and expose all the rust on the outside of the tank, I did find a couple of areas I was concerned about, and I TIG welded large patches in these areas, just thick enough for the tanks to be reassembled into the work area. Adding extra material to the outside of the tanks made it very difficult to put the tanks back in, as there's only about a 1/4 inch of space, if that, to slide the tanks in between the two frames on the left and the right hand side of the tanks. So I had to be real cautious as how I was going to repair these tanks if that's what I had to do. After all cleaning and repairs were all done, The fuel tanks were coated with 4 coats of rust bullet to help seal the tanks from any further rusting and install new integrity for them to work as they were designed. The next photos are of the cleaning and inspection of the torso elastic and fuel tank framing. And as always, through my inspections, these areas needed upgrading and modifications as well. As you look at these photos, think of the singular tubing that you're viewing now that supports the torso elastic tubes, the fuel tank, and 70 gallons of fuel, about 560 pounds plus the weight of the fuel tank. This information was staggering on my mind, but again, not being an engineer, I probably do not realize the full power of angular tubing support system. I just had to use my common sense and modify these areas to make them stronger for me to accept and also know that they will never rust out as they now have as I inspect them. I found several areas in the bottom of the fuel tank framing that it was very easy to poke holes through the framing with a screwdriver. So again, I had to come up with a plan to repair and modify these areas, and I did. Look at these photos closely to see the areas of rust I found, and again, so glad to have discovered these areas to repair, but also to be able to pass this information of concern to all of you that are interested in watching these videos and that also may be concerned. Now I know these eagles have been around a long time and nobody probably has ever really questioned how the framing is all done and how it's all made and everything like that. I just don't want everybody to think that everything I'm doing is something that they have to do. It is necessary to make your bus stronger than what it already really is. I just don't want you to panic, but this is just something that I choose to do for myself, and this is the way I've always planned to do things. After seeing all the areas of concern to me to be needing repair or reinforcement to satisfy me, I began my plan of attack. As noticed in the following photos, you will see my double framing process of reinforcing any areas of concern, which created a lot of extra work, but it was very rewarding and very costly. The fuel tank framing was also reinforced and also enclosed on the bottom to prevent any moisture, dirt, and so forth to come off the road again and cause any rust in the near future. Lots of planning were needed here, as well as draining of the fuel tanks had to be planned in the case this was necessary in case of leakage from one of the fuel tanks. The fuel tank had to be temporarily reinstalled to look at clearances for waste tank piping and so forth. Hooking up the fuel fill tubes had to be done also to be sure that any modifications done to the tank and everything like that, and to the area where the tank is to go, was done to ensure that everything was located in the correct places and that there was full clearance to reinstall the fuel tank. Final enclosure of the fuel tank area is done, painted, and ready for assembly of the fuel tank. An access door will be assembled in the fuel tank area on the left, and this will be seen in later video. As I stated earlier, fuel tank drainage valves had to be planned into the enclosing of the bottom of the fuel tank. This enclosure of the tanks is fundamental in controlling road debris and moisture from causing future damage to the fuel tank. And I'm really pleased the way this all came out. Notice, the removal of the bus air system air tank was made easier and possible with the fuel tanks being out, while I was on my hands and knees working underneath the bus. This was now done before putting in the repaired fuel tanks for the last time. Look closely at the removed air tank at the sloppy welding repair on the original air tank, and the entire assembly of this tank was horrible. The tank was removed, photographed for these videos, so it can be seen what was done by repair shops in the past. This was scary, and I am sure I had air leaks around this area, but not sure, as I never reached for air drops in my gauges or by sound outside of my bus because I used it only once to drive it home 17, 18 years ago. There was no manual moisture drains installed in my air tanks, and I'm sure these tanks were rusted out in the inside beyond my imagination. Not to keep everything so serious, I included a photo of me in 2003, mind you, of one of these days I was so dirty my wife thought I was a homeless person needing a bath. Now with the repairs done on the fuel tank framing, it was also time to make my plans as to inspect and make a plan of repair and modify of the bogie wheel wells. The outer fluid skins of the bus were removed in this area, just knowing what to expect under the removed skins, and I was not let down. The entire bus undercarriage from the floor level down just had to be replaced, or up to 80% was my guess. Now look closely at the framing between the bogie wheel wells and the dry wheel well, and as after the removal of the outer skin. You will see a pocket of rust particles beyond imagination, but now I'm getting used to this sight. It is so good to see the final repair photos to reflect on, to feel good about what I accomplished, but I would never do it ever again. Now if you look closely at the outside wheel hoops that form the wheel wells itself, you'll see how rotted that the framing is. And so nothing is salvageable. Everything has to be replaced and will be. But just need to have you get the full effect of what I was up against. And you can see that it was quite a challenge. And I'm so glad to see it all done. Repairs and reinforcing of the bogie wheel framing is done after much planning. Close viewing of these photos will show my progress of improving the bus framing inside the wheel well and outer modifications using my double framing in the areas of stress, which are done for integrity, again according to my thought process. I'm no engineer, as I keep reminding everybody of. I installed solid wall 8-inch tubing rolled to the radius of the original bus frame, which is done to further eliminate an area for rust to form and destroy the outer framing. And this came out very, very well. Installing these new hoops, I want to refer to them as, was the best thing that I could have done. And I was really very pleased that it was able to have this done. The next photos is where we finally come to the finished product of my bogie wheel repairs, which now shown all painted. You can now appreciate how much better this area looks to when I first started this conversion. You can see in steps in these photos the total enclosure of the fuel tank area to the very end, when the only thing missing is the aluminum access door. Hope you enjoyed this viewing of my bogie wheel area. Looking at these final photos, now you can probably appreciate how I feel when I look at them myself and I see the accomplishments that I made and how well this wheel well turned out. And now, because of the time limit given to me to produce these videos and everything like that, it's just about time for me to call it to the end of my video. And thank you for viewing and watching this here. And believe me, there's going to be more coming. And I hope all this information is going to be constructively accepted by you. And I appreciate any comments and everything like that. I hope they'll all be positive and none negative. But enjoy the video. And again, thank you for viewing.